And speaking about getting the cases resolved, what are the things when trying to negotiate a settlement or resolve the case? Can you speak on the different ways that a workers' comp claim can be settled?
Well, there's several different ways. One is by going to a hearing and having a commissioner tell us what the value of your permanent impairment. But so under workers' comp, there's three benefits. There's medical benefits for any medical treatment that reasonably tends to lessen your disability. There's the weekly while you're written out of work. We talked about those, the TTD and the TPD. The final benefit that you're owed is for something called permanent partial disability, your PPD, and it could be perm total, so it could be permanent total disability. So at that point, what we are looking at, because it's the term disability. You notice I didn't say impairment, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of confusion between. So somebody gets a 10% impairment to their back. Well, that's different for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I'll give you a classic example. So you got a 22-year-old roofer who's been doing heavy lifting his whole life, and he's been a painter, he's been a roofer, he's been a framer, has very little or no education. He's 22 years old. He falls off the roof. He ends up with a 15, 20% impairment to the back, but he also has no climbing, no stooping, no bending, no lifting restrictions. Mm-hmm. Well, that's going to have a greater disabling effect than, let's say, the accountant or the lawyer who trips over a banker's box full of files on his way out the door, to go meet with a client, trips over the box, face plants, injures his neck, ends up with the same impairment rating of 15%. Well, that 15% for the lawyer or the accountant or banker, that's not going to have the same disabling effect as it would for the roofer. So workers' comp pays you for the disability. And kind of like in a Social Security case, you have to look at the totality of the circumstances in order to determine the disability. So you take that 14B, you look at the impairment rating, the restrictions, and the future medical expense, and then you take into consideration the age, occupation, the job training. You look at all of these factors to determine whether or not or what the actual disability is for that person, right? And then, of course, we've got a statute which goes and lists, all of the scheduled members, all of your body parts. Our State House, in their infinite wisdom, has decided that each of our body parts are worth a certain number of weeks. And so workers' comp, the permanency that workers' comp is paying you for, is typically designed to replace income that you may lose in the future because of your work injury. So there's two ways to settle the case. And I know I went the long way to get here, but so there's two ways to settle the case. There's one you can settle on 16 or 16A, which leaves open your medicals for a period of 1 year in the event that you have a change of condition, okay? And so that doesn't mean they have to pay for your medicals for the rest of your life unless you're permanently totally disabled or you've got hardware or a prosthetic device, and we'll talk about that in a different podcast. But so you got a 16A, and you have what is a full and final settlement agreement. And that agreement we always refer to as a clincher agreement, and essentially the workers' comp carrier can basically buy that risk. So instead of them being responsible for any change of condition or any future medical expense, they can settle out the case and have no more obligation to the injured worker, and it closes out the case. Now what we see a lot of times in these situations, and I'm not real pleased with the way they've been doing this recently, is they're demanding or requesting a resignation, which really shouldn't have anything to do with the on-the-job injury, but they typically don't want that worker back. Sends a bad message to other workers. Hey, he still kept his job. He was able to come back. Or they're worried about re-injuring himself or injuring someone else. And I'll give some insurance carriers are better than others. And, I deal with them, and I've been doing it for 26 years. And there's some that are really good, and there's some that are just not very, very good at all. But so that's why it's really important to have a lawyer, because, you're giving up a lot. And, insurance companies would love to settle with an injured worker without a lawyer involved, because they don't know all of these different things. And a lot of times, they'll try to settle with someone, but they still owe back TTD. Like they the person was out of work for 3 months and they never paid them for those 3 months, or they came back to work and they were paid a lot less than they were being paid.
Something that person would not know about.
Right. And so,
and the insurance company definitely is not going to bring it up.
Most of the time I find they're not going to volunteer information. Yeah. You know, they enjoy the fact that you don't know what you don't know. And so, you know, having done this for 26 years and have tried lots of workers' comp cases, you know, one of the benefits of having a lawyer who handles workers' comp, you know, I think sometimes, you know, lawyers who handle personal injury, you know, think that they can handle a workers' comp case because it's just like a personal injury case, but that's so far from the truth because, you know, it's very particular. It's a very narrow kind of practice area. And because it is, if you do workers' comp, all of the attorneys and all the adjusters, they know who you are. And we work together over and over on cases. Sometimes I've got the same attorney on 4 or 5 or 6 cases. And so, you know, having someone who's actually tried a case, and I've tried a lot of cases, and, you know, I'm not afraid to go to a hearing. Yeah. The commissioners know who I am. And they know that if I'm at a hearing, or if you're at a hearing, Kevin, they know that it's something serious that's in dispute, and we're not just there wasting their time. And your reputation with the commissioners and these other attorneys become very important because they're not going to take you seriously unless you're willing to take a case all the way. And like I said earlier, you know, I've taken one early in my career all the way to the Supreme Court of South Carolina and actually had oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court. So the attorneys and the commissioners, they know that case gets cited on appeal quite a bit. So, you know, biggest thing to do really, Kevin, is if you think you've gotten hurt on the job, report it. If they send you to one of their doctors, you need to go to one of their doctors. And at that point, you probably should get a lawyer involved. The sooner we can get involved, the sooner we can, you know, make sure that you're getting the proper medical treatment, that you're getting the proper weekly benefit. Because sometimes, you know, and I've seen this happen too, where you've only been on the job for, you know, 8 weeks, and then you end up with a compensation rate, a comp rate, that's not properly calculated. So, you know, getting a lawyer involved early, I find, is very helpful.